Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Jim Kleiber Show. Today is Monday, January 4th, 2021. We made it through 2020. Somehow, some of us. I don't want to say that we should super celebrate because there are many of us who didn't make it through 2020. There are many of us who barely made it through 2020. There are many of us who made it through but have a lot of pain and sorrow that we're carrying with us. And a lot of fear and worry. So we are here in 2021. While I think it is a moment to celebrate and to point towards hope, I also want to remember that many of us aren't feeling so hopeful right now. Oh, what to talk about. A lot happened. It's first, if you may notice that my background is slightly shifted. We did a little bit of cleaning in the basement over the holiday. It felt nice. A lot of nostalgia, going through old stuff, things that I haven't seen in years. School projects and things like this. It was nostalgia can be weird. It can bring up so many different feelings. Nostalgia perhaps is just kind of the wanting for the past, but maybe it has a kind of a hopeful feel to it, kind of a joyful feel to it. But there can also be the bad memories that come up, and the pain and the sorrow and the heartbreak and things like this too. Or the pride of doing well in school and things like this. Today, I want to talk about what happened yesterday. So yesterday, there was a leak of a phone call, or there was a recording of a phone call that President Trump had with the Secretary of State of Georgia, in which, among other things, President Trump said, I need you to find 11,780 votes. That's it, just 11,780 votes, something along those lines. And there has been a lot of people feeling outraged about this on the news channels, and I think there are a lot of people on the other side who don't seem so angry at what he said. They seem angry at the person who leaked the audio recording, or who gave the audio recording to the Washington Post. I commented on Twitter last night that it's almost like some people are very angry. It's almost like when somebody's caught in a relationship cheating, however you would define cheating. I think people define it differently. But regardless, caught cheating on a spouse, and the spouse says, I found out that you cheated on me. And then the person responds, who told you? And gets very angry at the person who told. And focuses the whole conversation about that person shouldn't have told you. What is this? This is a travesty, such a traitor. This is the ultimate betrayal. You can't do that. I've been seeing this on Twitter. Oh, you breaking the man code. The man code, no man ever reveals a private conversation that he has with another man. Things like this. For me, that seems to center on this idea, not focusing on the transgression itself, in this example of cheating, but focusing on the person who told, and which seems to go back into that idea of, what do they say? Snitches get stitches. Apparently in England they say snitches end up in ditches, which is a bit even deeper. But so some people seem to be very angry at what was said in the call, and other people seem to be very angry at who would tell the quote-unquote authorities about such a call, who would snitch. Why do we get so angry at people who snitch? Why do we get so angry at people who tell the truth about what we're doing? Especially when it's the truth. Like, I can understand if they're lying about it. We can get very angry if they take what we say and they morph it and manipulate it. But when they reveal what we're actually doing, why do we get so angry? Because we don't want people to know it, because we've been hiding it, we've been struggling to hide it ourselves, because we're worried about the consequences, because, I don't know, I think a lot of trust lies not only in being open and honest with people. But this idea of, if I'm open and honest with you, I trust you not to tell other people what I've told you. And one of the biggest acts of betrayal can be to share my secrets with someone else. The challenge is, when that secret hurts other people, are we supposed to hold it in? What are we supposed to do when we know we're friends? Say for example, it's the relationship again, because I think this comes up very often in our lives. What if we know both of the people, and we know one of the people, one of the people are doing something very hurtful to the other, but the other one doesn't know it? Should we let them know? Because it hurts us sometimes to hold on to the information that they're hurting, the other person, and the other person doesn't know. Because then later on, if that person finds out, they say, well, why didn't you tell me? It's a really bad position to be in. That person wants us to be open and honest and tell them what we know. And the other person wants us to be the opposite, to hide it and hold it in. And that's just with a two-person interaction, or a triangle rather, two people and then us as the third person. But what happens when it's related to the law and it's related to society? This isn't just a conversation between two guys, the president and the secretary of state, or Trump and I forget his name. It's not just a conversation between those two about things that happen just between those two, or maybe to a third person. This involves arguably 300 million people, 330 million people, or 40, however many we have. So is that person supposed to hold on to that and not expose that information to others? I don't know. Actually, isn't it a crime if you know somebody committed a crime? I don't know. This could be totally out of left field and not correct at all. But is it a crime if you know somebody committed a crime and you don't report it? Like, is not snitching illegal in some ways? Do you become an accomplice to the crime? So I think there's that part of the conversation. That part of the conversation about people getting very angry at the person who talked about the transgression, or who gave this tape to the Washington Post. And I come from the standpoint of, if it's, I think it's really hard decision if it's, again, just three people involved, and it's your best friend and his spouse, or your best friend and her spouse, or something like that. But when it involves so many people, I think there is an obligation. I think the balance falls on reporting and not on hiding something like this. That's my personal opinion. I would say the other thing that I want to talk about is what Trump actually said on the tape. So while I haven't listened to the whole tape, and perhaps you can fault me on that, and perhaps I'll be wrong on some of these things, that's fine. What I did hear, and I've heard in a lot of the conversations that Trump has, is that tendency to say, here is a task I want you to do it. I need you to find 11,780 votes. Find them. And some people in the news are saying, oh, it's a very mafioso technique. It's very mafia, this and that. And perhaps it's used in the mafia, but I think saying it's a mafia technique hides that hidden demonization of Trump, or maybe not so hidden. But I think it's a technique that many people in just simple top-down organizations use. In organizations that have top-down hierarchy, with kind of a command and control style, that's a communication technique that's often used. I imagine it's used very similar, in the military. I need you to do this, go do this. If you don't do this, there are going to be repercussions. It's used in a lot of businesses. I bet you most businesses are very top-down hierarchy in terms of their governance style. And they say, I need you to do this task. If you don't do this task, you are fired. I am going to fire you. And so people do the task. Now, in a business, there's a lot of freedom to tell people what to do. And if they don't do it, you can fire them, I believe. In a democratic organization, it doesn't work that way. The U.S. government, especially when it comes to the state levels, the federal and the state level, is not a top-down hierarchy. The President of the United States cannot go into a state and tell people what to do. Arguably, that's the whole reason it's called the federal government, is because we have a national government and a state government, and there's a balance of powers between the two. And arguably over, throughout history, maybe at least probably say the last 50 years or so, the Republican Party has been much more focused on local governance and not wanting to have a very strong national government. So this idea that the Republican Party candidate, or the president who comes in and tries to tell the states what to do, one, just doesn't fly in terms of the conservative ideology, from what I understand, which was more based on states' rights. But two, isn't really how democratic governance works, which is okay. It's just, this is some of the problem I see with having someone who is used to doing top-down control in a private organization where he has a lot of control over how his business is run, to running a public government. Heck, public companies don't even have that much control. So it's almost like a balance of, how strong is the top-down hierarchy? If you look at a public company like a Google or Alphabet or Apple or IBM or GE or any of these large corporations, they have outside stakeholders that they're responsible to. They're responsible to the board of directors, which, depending on the organization, may not really have too much teeth and grit to them, may not hold their selves to the fire. They're also responsible to the shareholders. And the shareholders can vote on many different things. Again, it depends on how democratic the organization is. But they're also responsible to the law. And by being a public corporation, you have many more regulations that you have to comply with. You have to comply with SEC regulations. You have to comply with other stuff as well. As a private company, I think there's a lot more flexibility. But so as a public company, yes, it may be top-down in many ways, but there's still things you have to adhere to outside of that top-down hierarchy that balance that power, that basically don't let you have all that power. But even in a private corporation, it's that way. If the president comes in and tells someone, in a private corporation, if the CEO of a private company comes in and tells someone, you have to go kill that person. If you don't kill that person, you're fired. The CEO of that company could say that, but the person isn't. The person could do that, but they're both breaking the law. And so even just suggesting that a person do that, I think, is probably a crime. Trying to order somebody to go kill somebody, I think, is a crime. So even when you're running a private organization, we still have to adhere to these laws that are outside, which in a way do curb our freedom to do what we want to do. But that's part about living in a society where we have laws, is that laws restrict many of our freedoms to allow the freedoms of other people, right? To not get killed. We don't let you have the freedom to go kill people because we're giving other people the freedom to not be killed. And but in a private organization, it's sometimes easier to hide a lot of these transgressions or these things that we would do that would break norms or laws or etc. As the organization becomes larger and more public, even if it's top down, there's still more attention, there's more regulation, there's more outside balance of power. As it's a public and a democratic structure, there's even more balance of power, that people can't just make top-down decisions and tell people below what to do. So arguably, even in the executive branch of the United States, even in the president's office, there are only so many things. The president can command people to do things, but it has to comply with the law. It has to comply with the budget that's set forth by the Congress and the legislative branch. It has to comply with regulations that have been put forth in place. It has to rely, it has to abide by many of these things that are outside of just that top-down hierarchy. And that's just ordering people within the executive branch what to do. When you start talking about, like, the president can't go to somebody in Congress and say, I need you to do this. I need you, senator, to do this. And if you don't, you're fired. Because the senator would laugh. What are you talking about? I'm fired. He doesn't have the legitimate power to fire a senator. Now, he could argue, well, I'm going to threaten you, and then I'm going to try to primary you out of the election. And there's other ways to threaten, and to do so in not legitimate ways. Arguably, many of those ways are illegal as well, right? Or shady at the least. But to go into a state government, which is a separate organization, I mean, the legislative branch and the judicial branches are separate at the federal level. But to go into a state executive branch or state judicial branch and tell them, or legislative, and tell them what they have to do, or what? Or he's going to threaten them again. Again, he doesn't have any legitimate power to fire them or get them out of their job. So it would have to come through maybe political power. We're going to try to rally a lot of people to hate you, or we're going to spread lies about you. Very quickly, some of those things start to bleed into breaking the law, right? Because he doesn't have the law hasn't given him the power to remove people in those positions, or to direct people in those positions. From at least what I understand, it's possible that him saying, I need you to find this many votes, breaks the law, because he's not allowed to ask people at the state level. He's not allowed to interfere. I mean, there are laws at the executive branch where they're not allowed to endorse a candidate if they work for the executive branch. It's called the Hatch Act, I believe. You're not allowed to endorse or really campaign for the candidate, especially using federal money, the money that you use for the current position. So there's lots of laws and regulations that hinder the freedoms that people have in the executive branch, and in the other branches as well. But in the other branches, they're not as top-down hierarchical. Maybe the judicial branch in some ways, because it goes up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has hierarchy over all the other courts in the land, if it reaches up there and they decide the case. But the legislative branch, the Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate, it's done by vote. Things are passed by vote. Yes, maybe there's some hierarchy within there in terms of leadership and how things are brought to the floor and things like that. But overall, it's done by kind of distributed power voting, or a more democratic process. So this idea that Trump will go into a state and tell someone in the executive branch of the state what he needs or wants them to do, and expects that they'll do that. One, he doesn't have any legitimate power, I don't think, at all, to say that. Two, I think there were laws written so that someone wouldn't do that, and therefore I think it breaks the law. But I think whether he did or didn't break the law, I think the more important question that I want to ask is, why would somebody do this without having that evil intent? And I think a lot of it is just communication style. He's used to communication style of telling people what to do and they do it for him, and he threatens them if they don't do it for him. But that only seems to work in organizations where he has the power to do that. So I think he thinks he has the power to do that, to come in and command and tell people what to do, but he doesn't. And that's why I'm excited to have someone who understands democratic governance and who understands more balance of power and less strict top-down hierarchy approach to communication and decision-making to run the country. Because they don't run the country, they run the executive branch of the country, the executive branch of the federal government of the country. And this idea that the president runs the whole country is not true. There's so many checks and balances on what the president is able to do. And if somebody doesn't like it, that's okay. But that's how our democracy is designed. We have a democratic republic, and that's how it's designed. We vote to elect people, and we vote at the local levels. And basically, the federal government unites all the states together, United States, and the states have rights, and the federal government has rights, and there's a balance between the two. And if people don't like to govern in that way, it's okay. Don't run for office. Don't try to be in a position where you're forced to govern in that way. We can change that, but that requires writing a whole new constitution. I don't know if we think about this so much. Like, if we want to have either pure democracy or we want to have pure top-down control, that's a whole different form of government. Both of them, two different sides of government. But I would say, listen, I think I can feel very outraged at many of the things that Trump does, and I'm trying to pull back and figure out why is he doing them, and what is his tendency, and what is his patterns that lead him to do this. And I think it may be fear, anger. I think a lot of emotions that are motivating it, but I'm trying to understand how does it come out in terms of behaviors. And I see this behavior a lot in people who are very strict top-down hierarchies. I remember when I first started working on emotional self-defense, I worked with some military vets, and I was talking to them to learn more about what's the communication style in the military. And one guy said to me, he says, "Oh, the communication style in the military, somebody who outranks you tells you what to do, and there's always somebody who outranks you." I was like, wow. And so I found, or I believe, that for many people who are in the military, when they come back into society, they struggle because maybe they're a father and they tell their kid what to do, and their kid says no. You can't say no. You're telling their 5-year-old kid what to do, and the kid says, "No, I don't want to. I'm not going to do that." In a very strict top-down hierarchy, there's not a lot of room for no. But I think one of the brilliant aspects of the American government is that it is not a strict top-down hierarchy. And there's a lot of room for no. And arguably this makes us much slower, and it makes it harder for us to develop things quickly. But it also spreads the power so people can't go too far in one direction too quickly, right? So it's almost an intentional slowing down to make sure that things move at a more measured pace and include more people. So, do I think what Trump was doing was a mafioso tactic that he was trying to I don't think, maybe, but I think it's much more akin to someone just communicating in a very top-down way and living a life where he communicated in a top-down way and people did what he told them to do. And if not, he threatened to sue them or take them to court, which is pretty much what he's doing now. I think even in the call, he said, "Yeah, I need you to find this stuff, and if you don't, I'm going to sue you, or I'm going to file criminal charges or something like, basically, you do this or else." In a company, it can be you do this or I'm going to fire you. But in that kind of top-down, I tell you what to do, I'm the boss mentality, it's you do this or I'm going to sue you or I'm going to threaten you in some way. Now, maybe that's where it goes into the mafioso style, which is maybe you do this or I'll kill you, or you do this or you're out of the family, where it becomes much more severe punishments for not following through on the task. But I want us to step back and look at just the style of communication, the style of decision-making and governance, and see if that's what's causing the problem. Someone who thinks he can come in, or who seems to think he can come in and tell people what to do, no matter which position they're in, works when he owns the whole company and he's basically not telling them to commit crimes. But when he doesn't own the whole company and people don't work directly for him and people aren't under his jurisdiction or his command, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And there are many laws in place to prevent things like this. And even if there aren't laws in place, people can just say no. And there's not much he can do about it. And so, yeah, I think I'm a bit worried about what will happen in the next couple of days. Just a last thing to mention is that there was a Washington Post op-ed opinion piece by all the former secretaries of defense who are currently living. 10 of them wrote a joint op-ed urging the military to stay out of election matters and say that the election is done and that we're moving forward, basically. I hope that Trump, in his mindset of this is the last, in his top-down hierarchy command style, does not try to command the military to do something and to intervene. And I also hope that if he does, the people in the military remember that they are subject to state, national, and international law. And not just subject to it, but also have state, national, and international law on their side as well. That they don't have to say yes if they're commanded to do something that they think either breaks the law or breaks with their moral code. Yeah. So I leave this kind of on a feeling a bit sad and hopeful that we as a country stop demonizing people and just try to look at their behaviors and understand them rather than blame them, but also at the same time want to have people that have behaviors that coincide with what we expect people to do in those positions. I want somebody who knows how to run a public government and has a behavioral style that makes decisions incorporating the fact that that person doesn't have all the decision-making power and can't tell people what to do, can't tell everyone what to do. And that's a much more democratic kind of distributed decision-making style than a top-down hierarchical decision-making style. And I think top-down is good for many situations. I think in certain crises it's good. In certain businesses, especially small businesses, it can be really good. I think in some situations it could be fantastic. I just don't think it gels well with how the United States government is structured. And not just structured on a superficial level, but all the way down to the Constitution, to the core structure of the United States government as it is. So I hope this helped you reorient what's going on with the audio tapes and to see it as a communication decision-making challenge. And frankly, to recognize that we don't have a top-down decision-making government. We do in some parts, but even then, it's quite limited as it is compared to a private company. If you're a person who likes to make very strong top-down decisions and doesn't like outsiders telling you what to do or how to run your thing, you may not want to run for political office in this country. That's not our style. In other countries, they have a much more top-down, centralized government style. And perhaps you think that's better. I don't know. Right now, what I'm not trying to do, I'm not trying to have the conversation about whether we should have a top-down government style, which some people call more authoritarian, which isn't supposed to necessarily be a negative thing. It's just incompatible with democratic styles. But rather to talk about what kind of governments do we currently have, and is the person who's the head of the executive branch right now currently abiding by that style or not. I don't think he is. And I don't think it's because he's an evil person. I just think that he just doesn't do that style of governance very well. Anyways, welcome to 2021. I hope you like my shorter beard. It's I miss it. The hair's still long, so we're halfway there. But anyways, take care, y'all. Happy New Year's, and talk to you soon.